You have a fairly expensive drug that is appropriate for a condition that 40% of the adults in the US have, and many of that 40% of adults are interested in taking. You're talking enormous numbers of dollars.
These drugs list for upwards of $1,000 a month, and even if insurance companies negotiate those rates down, and there are rebates, when insurance companies, private or government, do cover it,
That money comes from somewhere, either through higher taxes and higher premiums, or you're shifting it from other things that need money too.
for now, it's too early to tell exactly what these weight loss drugs will mean for overall healthcare costs. But researchers see a significant upside in the long run, like reduced rates of heart disease and diabetes, which are also expensive to treat. Allison Sexton Ward is a research scientist at the Schaefer Center at the University of Southern California.
With treatment of obesity, you'll see a reduction in a lot of the costs. And as more drugs come to market, that will continue to drive down the price.
Eli Lilly's drug is priced about 21% lower than Novo Nordisk's, so that price competition is already getting started. In Washington, I'm Kimberly Adams for Marketplace.
Financial markets are still open on this Veterans Day observed. I see Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures all up 0.3% now. The 10-year interest rate is down at the moment, 4.57%.
And dinner gas.
This year marks half a century since the revolutionary arcade game Pong got a wide release to bars and arcades. We note that there are moments in U.S. history when arcade games, pinball, and the like were outlawed in some cities and states. And there's enduring interest for playing the oldies, which is at the heart of a business model for a fellow Californian who turned his teenage passions into a flourishing enterprise.
Hi, I'm Gene Lewin. I'm the owner of Vintage Arcade Superstore in Glendale, California. I remember the first day I went to riding my bike with a friend, and he said, "Do you want to play pinball?" And I had only seen it in other states because it was illegal in Los Angeles, where I grew up, and played it, and I won a replay. I was hooked. That was in '72. So after that, arcades started springing up everywhere, and I went to all of them. Rode my bike. This arcade was going out of business, selling all their games. I gave them a deposit. I went home to tell my parents I'm buying a pinball machine, and then I started tinkering with it. I met a guy that knew something about it and started showing me stuff, and when I realized maybe I can actually do this, that's all I wanted to do. I first put my pinball machine in a billiard place that I used to play games at. None of their games worked right, and mine was perfect, so it made more money than the others. Then I talked to them in a second game and a third game, eventually put all of my games in and take the other guys out, talked them into taking over the whole place. That was in '76 and '77. Then I opened my first arcade in 1980, and I ran arcades all the way to 1998. And there's big pinball tournaments, too, that I like to go to. So I won the vintage tournament. They have vintage, or classic, they call it, and then modern. So the funny thing about the vintage tournaments is I'm playing on games that I played when I was a teenager, and a lot of the guys I'm playing against weren't born yet.
Entrepreneur Gene Lewin at Vintage Arcade Superstore in Glendale, California. That story comes to us from the team at Marketplace's Million Bazillion, our podcast about money for kids. I'm David Brancaccio with our morning report. From APM, American Public Media.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. At ViStar Credit Union, we believe in helping members reach their financial goals and building stronger communities. It's why we offer our members better rates and give back to the places we call home. ViStar Credit Union. Visit vistarcu.org/join.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
It's the biggest stories of the week. I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect Week in Review, reuniting the city's dueling MLK breakfasts, how investigations into local law enforcement officers are impacting prosecutors, and your pocketbook, the continuing legacy of redlining in Jacksonville, and renewed city efforts to solve homelessness. Then, 3 unmissable concerts from the Jacksonville Music Experience. It's all ahead after the day's news.
Good morning. It's 1 minute after 9 o'clock. This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Work on 4 new public parks on Jacksonville's South Bank should be complete by the end of next year. The parks are part of the River's Edge development, which will include homes along with shops, offices, a hotel, and marina, according to the Jacksonville Daily Record. The riverfront parks will have interconnected paths, playgrounds, an amphitheater, and public art. More than 4 dozen Palestinian rights advocates from a coalition of organizations across South Florida were met with Israeli Jewish counter-protesters in Boca Raton yesterday. Wilkin Brutus reports.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Pro-Palestine groups and Israeli counter-protesters clashed in front of Real-Time Laboratories in Boca Raton, an American subsidiary of Elbit Systems, an Israeli arms manufacturer. Jeff Weinberger was one of the lead organizers for the Palestinian rights group.
Well, we're protesting an Israeli arms manufacturer because they're a merchant of death and genocide and apartheid. This conflict did not begin on October 7th.
Kafir Baranis is a Jewish Israeli leader of a group called Sons of David, a group that seeks out pro-Palestine demonstrations and mobilizes counter-protests.
And we go in because we saw that a lot of Jewish people throughout Florida scared to go to certain places. They scared now to put the yarmulke on their heads. They feeling like they under siege.
Palestinian rights groups say the protests are part of a growing movement advocating for Palestinian statehood, especially as the Israel-Hamas war rages in the Middle East. I'm Wilkin Brutus in Boca Raton.
Partly sunny today, low 80s this afternoon. Now in Jacksonville, it's partly cloudy at 71 degrees.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Opinions expressed on the Friday Media Roundtable are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and you're listening to First Coast Connect. It's Friday, so that means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. And I'm going to be talking to 4 of my favorite local news hounds about some of the big headlines this week. Among our topics, the cost to taxpayers for a controversial police shooting, and city leaders and NFL Hall of Famers turn their focus to ending homelessness. And later, unmissable concerts from the Jacksonville Music Experience. It's a full show today, so let's get to it. Joining me today, my former colleague and Good Morning Jacksonville anchor, Keitha Nelson from First Coast News. Welcome, Keitha.
Hey, Ann. I am over here cheesing like a proud parent. I'm so excited for you. I love seeing you in this role.
Oh.
I knew that you were just going to smash and do an awesome job, and you are. This is
Keitha,
great.
thank you. Well, it's so fun to have you. Thanks for coming today.
Yeah.
Randy DeFore, a Jacksonville attorney and former city council member, in addition to being a regular contributor. Welcome.
Thank you, Ann. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. Investigative reporter Ann Maxwell with News for Jax.
Ann, thank you for having me.
Another first-timer. Welcome.
Thanks.
And Charlie McGee, poverty reporter with The Tributary. Welcome, Charlie.
Good morning, Ann. Good to be here.
Good to be here. You can listen live on the radio or check out our video stream on Facebook and the WJCT YouTube page. But don't just watch. Join our conversation. Please call us at 549-2937. Tag us on X at FCC On Air, or send an email to the First Coast Connect email at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also message us on Facebook or Instagram. So first, a push for unity. After 5 years of hosting competing events honoring Martin Luther King Jr., the city is trying to heal that rift. Mayor Donna Deegan saying this week the two sides will come back together for one event this year. Since 2019, Jacksonville has hosted 2 breakfast celebrations after acrimony developed between local civil rights groups and the administration of then Mayor Lenny Curry. Keith and Nelson, this breakfast was a tradition that dated back to 1987. What happened?
I remember it vividly, the break when all of that happened. The NAACP, they were saying they didn't really feel as if they had a seat at the table when it came to planning, and they didn't have the input they wanted, clearly. And there was a lot of rift between that administration, the Curry administration, and NAACP, and then it happened. And it was something that we heard the rumblings about for a while, and then when it finally did, they split. They had their own breakfast. We were kind of like, this is really happening. And it was kind of sad. It really was, because it felt as if it's supposed to be a breakfast to unite the city, yet and still we're separating. So to see the Deegan administration come in and finally work things out for them to be back together again, having one breakfast this coming up MLK celebration, it's a good thing. It's a great thing. It feels good, and I'm glad it's happening, and hopefully it stays that way. We shall see.
So the NAACP and the Curry administration, as Keith has said, kind of had some disagreement, but it was this long-established event. Randy DeFore, you were serving on city council then. So what was the vibe inside City Hall when that whole thing went down?
I think it got political. Let's just say what happened. And it was sad. It was sad for Jacksonville. But I am super excited that they're bringing it back. And as you know, Martin Luther King said, there's always time for reconciliation. So, and Donna's doing exactly what she said she was going to do. She's unifying our city, and this is a great example of it.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, at the time it happened, was there surprise? Was there any effort by people in the city like yourself to say, hey, let's not go this direction?
It really was driven by the administration. The city council had no say at all in that matter.
And did you hear from constituents at all at the time that were concerned? Or
Absolutely, especially my district. I had a very, I would say mixed district, and they were very concerned. Yeah, it was sad for the city. No one wins when that happens. Nobody.
Have you attended one of the MLK breakfasts? Which one and why? We want to hear. Give us a call at 549-2937 or tag us on X at FCC On Air. You can also send us an email to WJCT, First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, and Maxwell. Officially, several people said this was a twofer, basically a chance to celebrate Dr. King at 2 forums, and a good thing. But others viewed this as symbolically as kind of a way, of Jacksonville's larger divide. What do you think people feel now looking at the attempt to unite it?
I would think a lot of people just out and about in the community wouldn't be super concerned with who's having breakfast with who on MLK Day in the community. But I think that the deeper issues behind the rift originally, my understanding is the NAACP had said, this is because City Hall wasn't being equitable in how it's, allocating resources and supporting these different communities. And that's kind of what led to that rift. So hopefully this is not just something that's symbolic, but something that is a sign of, maybe things changing a little bit for those communities, healing that rift a little bit. And I was also reading in the Times-Union that the mayor is also asking for this volunteer day of service to be extended, and asking for, I think it was $284,000 to go towards, actually doing some work, to not just be talking the talk, but walking the walk as everybody celebrates Dr. King.
So asked about it this week, Deegan said, quote, "I've said from the beginning that I think unity is a big deal in this community, and I'm excited about bringing everyone together for one breakfast." Charlie McGee from the Tributary, does unifying the event have any significance outside of Jacksonville, for the business community or Deegan's efforts to market the city elsewhere?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think a lot of the bad press that the city has maybe gotten in recent years stems from various forms of inequality, kind of like Ann was talking about. I think there is a cautious sort of optimism in a lot of different circles in Jacksonville about the Deegan administration, just talking to people who have been seeing these kind of issues for years. In housing, in law enforcement, no matter what it is, there's a sort of gap in Jacksonville, just region by region. neighborhood by neighborhood. And I think people really are hopeful that Mayor Deegan will follow through on that with policy and with actual grants getting passed through City Council or just her own office taking actions, whatever they can to change the dynamic. And like Ed said, on the surface, it's just a lunch, and I don't know that the people will be too affected by that one way or the other, but it is symbolic of a direction I think a lot of people are still hoping to see the Deegan administration take, but I think it's too early to tell at this point or to totally say, but it is a sign of something at least.
Yeah, symbolically, Keitha, I remember when the city was fighting the HRO, some fighting to get it passed, the Human Rights Ordinance, some fighting to block it. But there was a lot of discussion at that time, like, how does this make the city look? Big picture. We're trying to recruit businesses. We're trying to bring in, people from the outside to live here, to go to school here.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of thing that this became in some respects, or is it not that deep?
I just want to go back a little bit. I don't want us to say something. It's just a lunch or just a breakfast. I think this is so much more to so many people, right? This was symbolically what it represents. It really is a breakfast of unity, representing what MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., was really all about, what he fought for all of those years. So I don't want to discount it. It really is an important event. And the split, us saying the NAACP wants to do their own, the city doing their own, it was polarizing for a lot of people. Like, wait a minute, this is supposed to be something that unites us. What are we doing here? Like, let's try to work things out behind the scenes. This is not us presenting a unified front. And that's what we need to do, especially when we're supposed to be representing a man, and that's what he stood for. So, again, I'm just thank goodness that we finally got our stuff together, right, with this new administration. And hopefully, as Ann said, hopefully it's not just symbolic. Like, we really are going to make real change. We really are going to pour funds into all of our communities, right, that really need them. And in particular, I'm pretty sure they're talking about the North Side. We see a lot of disparities when it comes to funding being allocated to different areas. So hopefully this isn't just symbolic. Like, we're really going to put action to what we're saying we're doing here. Like, these funds are going to go to where they're needed.
We've got a caller, Mario on line 1, wants to share his experience from the MLK breakfast. Good morning, Mario. How are you? Go ahead.
Hi. Good morning, Ann. I appreciate you. It's such a great job taking over the show. And I attended several of the MLK breakfasts because I sat on the Human Rights Commission and also on the Mayor's Hispanic Board. And we frequented the breakfast and enjoyed it very much. And like your guest was just saying, it is a special event. You can feel the unity in the room. You can feel everyone from the different organizations, the banks, the hospitals, the leaders in the community being there. It brings pride to when you're there. You feel it, and it's a chance for us to celebrate the children who are highlighted at the event. Who are just like just these really smart kids from all over, and it's just nice to see how his legacy, MLK's legacy, is just continued through the city. And it was a heartbreak for me to see this leader, MLK, being politicized, like having. I mean, unfortunately, the previous administration found a way to politicize everything. And this is just another example of that. So it's just such a sigh of relief to have this event back, that we're looking for unity, we're looking for representation, and to celebrate our African-American leaders in Jacksonville. It's just really nice. So thanks for having this on the show today.
Thank you, Mario, for calling. I appreciate that. So politics, Randy DeFore, what are we saying when we're talking about, what could be political about this? Explain when you say politics are involved in this decision or this split. What's political about it?
I'm trying to remember exactly what happened.
Was it a little bit of ego? Can we be honest?
I think it was, it was left versus right. I really believe that's what happened, and and I think it shows it was a symptom of something greater. Very much so. What was going on in our community, and it was hurtful.
You know what's interesting is according to Isaiah Rumlin, who heads up the local NAACP, this event was originated by the local NAACP, the Jacksonville Urban League, and the Chamber And then the chamber pulled out and the city stepped in under Peyton to take over that responsibility. Charlie, I wonder what your thoughts are about the chamber having a role in something like that. The chamber, not to revert too much to comparing it to the HRO issue, but they took a stand on that. They were a driving force behind why the city finally did say, like, we've got to pass a human rights ordinance protecting, the LGBTQ community. Do you think that the chamber maybe should play a role in this moving forward?
Well, certainly. I mean, I think just to speak on the sort of symbolic meaning of the lunch, you wonder what Dr. King would say today if he was alive to see the sort of two different lunches being held in his name simultaneously. But I certainly think the chamber, you would think, should play a role because of how influential they are, just as drivers of revenue and GDP for the city. Of course, obviously having policy influence because policy is often passed sort of to accommodate them or in their own interests and or against their interests. But, they're intertwined with city government in many ways. And yeah, they should absolutely be involved in lunch. That, without them, there's a presence that's missing, I think, if it's going to be a unified, community-wide event. But it would be interesting. If they have comment on that, on whether or not they've considered it. I'm not sure.
We've got a call from Keith from Riverside. I believe he's got a question about how the money for this event is spent. Is that right? Good morning, Keith.
No, it's not about the money for this event. It's about money in general and priorities. The governor seems to be able to find money when it's time to, he found some money to help protect Edward Waters. He found some money for Israel. He's found money for all sorts of things, but he can't seem to find any money to get rid of the Confederate monuments in Jacksonville, which has been a long-standing issue. And we're talking less than the amount of money he wanted to spend to protect, beef up security for Edward Waters. So that would be one way to eliminate all of the issues you're talking about today. All relate to white supremacy and how it manifests itself in Jacksonville. So how about the mayor pushing the governor to come up with some money? He seems to find money for all his priorities, but none for removing these Confederate monuments.
Gotcha. Thank you, Keith, so much. Ann Maxwell, I don't know that our mayor is able to push our governor to do all that much, given the current political climate. But obviously the issue of Confederate monuments continues to resonate in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like you were saying earlier, this breakfast is a big symbol, and then you have these Confederate monuments that are also a big symbol of strife between these communities, hate in the past, and the fact that it's still here in the present and there's still so much controversy about it is a sign of, it's great that the MLK breakfast is going to be unified once again, but there are still other big racial issues that the city and the communities here need to tackle. So this MLK breakfast is, one symbolic thing, and then you got other symbolic things that are still going on and a lot more below the surface. Those are just kind of the really visible tips of the iceberg.
So that's a good segue to our next topic. We've been talking a lot lately about Jacksonville's history and legacy of redlining. Some of you will know that the strict definition of redlining is basically maps that were created and put forth by the federal government denying loans to Black and brown communities. These were federally dictated policies. They were declared illegal in 1968, but redlining has continued in a variety of ways. It impacts everything from whether a pizza delivery man comes to your neighborhood or whether a taxi will come pick you up in your neighborhood. For our listeners, do you live in a historically redlined neighborhood? Give us a call. We'd like to hear from you and hear your story about how that impacts you and your families. Charlie, the stories we want to talk about here are different, but they're related. So let's talk about one that you've been covering in particular. Tell us about the deal that Ameris Bank reached with the Department of Justice this week.
Yeah, so this was a deal that sort of, officially and between Ameris and the U.S. Department of Justice was consecrated and, agreed upon and announced on October 19th. But there was a snafu in court where essentially it's a settlement of claims that, as you just described, Ameris has redlined specifically Black and Hispanic majority areas of Jacksonville. and it's home lending, so mortgages or credit for home improvements, refinancing your mortgage, those kinds of services. As you described, they sort of, the government alleges that Ameris basically has, carved out certain areas that are these majority areas and just not offered those services in a very disparate way. This is a settlement, so these are all allegations, of course, but, the government lays out some pretty detailed evidence, and Ameris has basically said, we deny all the allegations, but we want to avoid litigation, a prolonged case, lawyer fees, all that stuff. So we'll just do this settlement to get it out of the way, but we vehemently deny any allegations of discrimination. But the deal basically includes $9 million in total of investments that Ameris is going to be required to make over the next 5 years. Although there's kind of provisions in the fine print that say, like, hey, if you haven't invested at all in 5 years, just you get a little more time or whatever. But $7.5 million of that is a loan subsidy fund specifically for Black and Hispanic majority census tracts in Jacksonville, which kind of sounds like a mouthful, but if anybody's who is listening looks up where you live and then look up the census tract that applies to, if the population of that area is Black or Hispanic majority, then you might be eligible for subsidies on a mortgage or something like that from Ameris in the near, medium-term future. They have to open a new bank as well, because one of the allegations is that the branches that Ameris has located here, I believe it's either 16 or 18, so working from memory here, but 16 or 18 in Jacksonville, and none of those are located in the kind of census tracts we're describing here. And, the lawsuit says the St. Johns River is a huge, obstruction for people who live in, like, the north side and have to cross, to get to any banking branch. And so it's basically an exclusion of certain areas from services that the government at least hopes, I guess, and Ameris has said, yes, we'll help ameliorate a little bit with a variety of different things, sort of focusing banking services in these areas.
Go ahead, Ann.
And one thing, which I didn't realize till I was looking through this yesterday, is how much money people can really get, up to $20,000 alone. Yeah. Help with the down payment and a direct lump sum grant, help with closing costs, which is something that could really help, maybe ameliorate a little bit some of these divides in generational wealth between white families and families who are Black, who are Hispanic in Jacksonville, who've been, maybe denied homeownership in the past because of redlining. So, you might not have help with your family to get a down payment like some people of privilege, can get. But with this, the fact you can maybe get up to $20,000 for a down payment, could make a really big difference if people are aware of it and take advantage of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like for Ameris, it's, they're a regional bank, like based in Atlanta, like they got lots of money. One could say, $9 million it's just a little bit off the top for them, but for just any homeowner or any individual person or family, 20,000 can be a game changer. So it's good to see that, I think.
Also for refinancing or repairs, so for people who already are in these communities and own homes, a little bit of extra help for them as well.
I want to ask you, Keitha, and I'll let you get to your point too.
Yeah.
But $9 million, so that is a chunk of change. But is there any calculation done of what has been lost over these many years? And I'm not asking you to do the math. I'm just saying, how does that compare to what?
Can you even calculate that, right? And you can't, right? Can you put a dollar amount to that? The loss over all of these generations. Can't even say years or generations. Great article, by the way, Charlie. I got a chance to look through it, and now I'm really interested in following the money and staying on top of this one, because I really want to see how Ameris, when they finally do allocate these funds, and how it's allocated, because as Ann said, that could really change lives, change families, if they do what they're supposed to do, what they've been ordered to do.
Right.
We shall see.
And as you say, about the sort of it's impossible to calculate, what truly the damage has been done by this practice. But one of the questions that I asked actually the Attorney General when he was here to announce, the deal was, is this a problem that's uniquely isolated to Ameris, or do we see this with other regional banks? Like, is Ameris like uniquely bad in its sort of focus of services, or is this maybe a wider spread issue, and is Ameris maybe, just one of many players?
Charlie, I think we know, right? We know the answer to that one. It definitely is. It's not an isolated incident. There's no way, no how. But they were caught.
Yes.
So the legacy of redlining
Allegedly.
The legacy of redlining continues to be reflected in other ways. Randy DeFore, land use and zoning issues, undesirable uses in historically Black communities, and those same communities often deprived of investment. This week we were talking to folks in the Brentwood community who've been really upset about a couple of planned projects, a morgue, a new medical examiner's office in the neighborhood right next to homes, and adjacent to what was planned to be a liquor store that they've been fighting. We spoke to a community activist, Lydia Bell. She's been leading the fight against both of those developments, and I just want to take a minute and listen to what she had to say, and then I'd like to get your thoughts.
Okay. They haven't built it. They can stop it. Jacksonville is too large. They could have put this place anywhere. Why would you choose to put it into a small neighborhood, a tiny neighborhood in front of school?
Randy DeFore, what role has the city played? What role does it play or need to play to erase those remaining red lines?
First of all, she's talking about the liquor store. I actually was on council when that all played out. And if I could just give you a little bit of background on that, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
That actually happened during COVID. So there were Zoom meetings. The liquor license, the liquor issue never came to city council. It actually went to the planning commission. So because we were all taken back by that, by the way, because everyone knew that the KIPP school was going to be located across the street. It was a known fact to the planning department, to everyone involved. And I can tell you the city council was horrified. And that, and because of that, Terrence Freeman at the time brought legislation to say that will never happen again, that we will always be made aware of what waivers are going to be done in relation to liquor license. Because I think that's part of it, right? There are more liquor stores in that area per square, it's mile than anywhere else in the city. And they have a right to be upset about it. On the bigger issue, the redlining, there's a lot that the city can do. There's a lot of things that they can do to help homeowners. There's vacant land that become available. And some of that they're doing. They're trying to help take land and houses that may have been abandoned and help others come in and take that housing. So there's stuff that is being done, but there's certainly a lot more that can be done, a lot more. And generational, the other thing I will say is we're seeing a lot of houses that have been in families for generations, but they were not properly probated. And they end up losing their family homes. And that's another area that as a community we can come together and help solve.
Yeah, we were actually talking to Pedro Cohen about that just last week. I believe he calls them heirless properties.
Right.
Where there isn't a designated heir that is in the record to take over that home. And so people are losing out on, potentially major wealth passed from one generation to another. And I know your station's I-Team has been reporting on the deplorable conditions at Colonial Gardens. So this is not directly perhaps connected, but related. This is a traditionally redlined neighborhood on the city's west side. The city this week say it's going to take legal action to try to recoup some of the costs that they've spent trying to make that habitable and livable again. What has your reporting found in terms of, how unusual that kind of condition is of an apartment complex?
Unfortunately, we get emails about poor living conditions and rental units all the time. I mean, if you could see our email inboxes, we could just report on, bad living conditions 24/7. It happens all over. And I think one of the big issues is that you get some of these big landlords some of them from out of town who really, might not have a stake in the community and are really just kind of trying to squeeze money out of these properties without really being aware of who their tenants are and what they need. And unfortunately, you see it in a lot of places, and it's really sad to see.
It does seem like something is missing, Keitha, from the mechanism there. I mean, because this particular place, there were people living in apartments that didn't have doors. There was, trash just heaped and overflowing, not just like over the dumpster, but over the entire property. So people are really living in unsafe conditions when it comes to, security or pestilence or whatever.
You're really going to make me have to work hard this morning, Ann, 'cause I'm trying to remember, and you will as well. You were at First Coast News with me when we were covering all these stories. Was it Eureka Gardens? Do you remember
which is
those
now
stories?
Valencia Way. Yeah, right.
Again, and it's the same story. We just heard him mention that. We're hearing these things again and again. People living in these deplorable situations, which it's kind of, I forgot, you're going to get into that, I'm sure. The lawsuit that was, not a lawsuit, it's Reggie Gaffney was speaking to this, saying,
injunction and the request to get some money back from the landlord.
You know what? I think it's time, right? We start putting these landlords put their feet to fire. It's time that you do something about this, and it sets the standards, a precedent for other landlords, letting them know we're not just going to sit by idly and let you do this. You can't come to Jacksonville, you can't build up these homes and then just leave these people there, treating them as if they're less than. Everyone matters, everyone counts, and in Jacksonville, you cannot do that. So that is setting the right precedence, letting you know you can't do that to people. Because again, we see these things day in and day out. I just got a text message this morning from someone. I'm not going to name the location because we're going to look into it, but I got pictures of dumpsters just overflowing with trash. He's telling me the people haven't been paid, and that's why they haven't dumped the trash. But we see this all the time. Like, someone needs to be held accountable, and it's about time. I'm glad it's happening because, again, that's going to set the standard, letting them know you can't come here, you can't build here, and not maintain these properties. We're not having it.
Randy DeFore, what is missing from city management, or what role can the city do that does more to ensure that this isn't happening?
Well, I think we're talking about two different kinds of properties. Some are HUD housing and some are not. So from a HUD housing perspective, we need to put a lot of pressure on the federal government to make sure that these owners are in compliance. That's some of I think Eureka might have been a HUD housing, and that was some of our challenges was the feds not coming in and helping us out. On these other ones, it's all code enforcement. It's all about money. The bottom line is money. If we can make it difficult for these owners to, have a return on investment because they're not complying, I assure you, they'll start complying.
I mean, the city's having to shell out money in an effort to make sure these people don't end up displaced and unhoused, because even though the conditions are terrible there, they're trying to correct them to the point that they don't have to just send all of these people who are living in a relatively low-income apartment complex to try to find housing elsewhere, Charlie. It's not easy to find affordable housing in Jacksonville already.
Right. That was the point I was, thinking, in tandem with this is if you have a situation like this, and I would just echo what multiple of my fellow guests have already said, like you can just, I've seen multiple apartments just in a few months of being here, more than I can really even count already that are, in sort of conditions like this. And it's very, very difficult, more and more by the day to find a new apartment, no matter who you are and like what your income bracket is really, depending on what you're willing to sacrifice to just have a place to sleep and stay. You might have to just go with a place that's in this kind of condition. And, in terms of money, another element of this issue that is, I think, difficult for every level of government is that real estate associations, like property managers associations, they're very powerful. A lot of lobbyists, they are, obviously putting pressure on policymakers to not do things like go crack down on, in a code enforcement crackdown on properties en masse. So, if you're in government, I think you're probably balancing a lot of interests. It's a conundrum for a political mind.
Yeah.
But from the ground, it's like, how could you let this happen? So.
And the city is, kind of batting cleanup on the back end. Keitha, you did reporting on homelessness, a number of stories recently, and participated in the city's telethon, where they were this week. They had a lot of local luminaries in, the sheriff, the former sheriff, advocating for, asking people to donate money.
Yeah. Quickly, I want to mention what I was talking about the city suing the owner of the North Side apartment complex. We had Councilman Reggie Gaffney speaking to that as well. That's in his district. So the city was filing suit against this complex because of these them not maintaining the property for the people who live there. But as for changing homelessness, yes, we had a telethon earlier this week, and the outpouring of support was just beautiful from the community, from those who were there. We had obviously Leroy Butler, who was a Pro Football Hall of Famer, actually from Jacksonville. He's obviously played with the Green Bay Packers. He's still living out there, but he came back home to show support for those in need here. So we also had Councilman Ken Amaro was out there, as well as several, Rockman Johnson. So a lot of people coming out showing that this really isn't a serious issue in our area. Homelessness is something that we all see, especially if you're in the downtown area. We work here. I work at First Coast News in downtown Jacksonville, so I see it day in and day out. And it's a serious issue that you'll hear time and time again is solvable. And the way we do it is as a community. That's what you heard all of the advocates pushing home during this telethon, is that it is solvable with us together. And so many people called in. The phones were ringing. Every time we went on air, it just lit up the phones with people making phone calls to donate money. And it was over 10,000 raised just from phone calls from people within this community giving to try to make a difference.
I want to mention, because you did interview Leroy Butler. He's a Rebo, or as we say, Rebo grad.
No, the name of the school was renamed to West Side High, I believe.
Oh, Forest. That's an interesting story. I don't know if we have to get into that here, but that did used to be named after a former Klansman. That only recently changed. So,
and I need to double check, but definitely not Reebok, because I know those grads are just like Reebok and Reigns. Those grads are a whole nother level. They're just so proud. So Leroy is from Blodgett Homes, which is close to us here in our downtown. And it really was crime-ridden when he was there. It's since been cleaned up. It was so bad when he was here, actually, they had to tear it down and rebuild the entire thing. But when we actually sat there, we put down 2 chairs, 2 lights, 2 cameras, and sat in the middle of this housing project. And he thought back to the days when he was struggling. Obviously, he's well off right now, a Pro Football Hall of Famer. But, the days of living paycheck to paycheck and what that was like for him and his mom and his siblings. So he understood, which is why he decided to sign on as an ambassador for changing homelessness in this telethon that they did, because he understood what it is. You talk to people who live paycheck to paycheck, they'll tell you all it takes is missing one check or having to do one car repair, and just like that, you're homeless. You've lost it all.
Well, let's hear a little bit from your interview with Leroy Butler, which aired about a week ago.
Yes.
It was easy for me, Keitha, because when you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you depend on the government, and you have anxiety of feeding your kids, and that check may not come, you could be homeless.
That's just it. Yeah.
And Maxwell, there are an estimated 3,000 veterans who are experiencing homelessness in Jacksonville right now. In hundreds in Jacksonville, I should say, 3,000 in Florida. Your station recently spoke to one former service member, and I thought that story really shined a light on how close some people are to homelessness. Let's take a listen to a segment of that, and then I'd like to get your response.
I went through a divorce, child custody, something that I did not anticipate, became depressed, and those things can tear you apart, can tear your heart out. And those are the things that behind everybody you see on the street, there's a backstory. And until we address the backstory, the mental health issues, the crisis that led to them being in that situation, we will never get to the bottom of resolving the problem of the homeless in Jacksonville, Florida.
Yeah, so that's Bill Adams, who works at one of the intake desks at the mayor's office. And so yesterday, our City Hall reporter, Jim Pickett, he goes to City Hall every morning, reads the mail, says, "Hey, what's up? What's going on?" So he runs into Bill Adams, and I don't know that he knew this about him before, but he started talking to him and, heard this amazing story he had, and I think it's really brave he shared that, and I hope it helps somebody else. As he's saying, you don't know what somebody who you see on the street has gone through, and it also might be you don't know what somebody sitting greeting you at the desk at the mayor's office has gone through, and it's just a really nice example of that, I think.
Yeah, and Randy, so this is somebody who's employed at City Hall. He's got a good and stable job, but really still very much aware of how close any one person is to the edge.
Yeah. One of the things that we really need to put a lot of effort into is mental health, especially with our veterans. And as you all know, our jail is our largest mental health provider. And what they did in South Florida and what we have started to do here is do a mental health diversion court. So what they'll do is they will use the individual's Social Security for disability and help them get housing through that process. But it's, and what happened in Miami is it ended up reducing their jails by 25%.
Wow.
It's huge. But they did a half-cent sales tax down there to pay for it. And so you have to put your money, obviously, set priorities and put money where to do it. And right now it's just not fun. It's not funded to the level that it needs to be in Jacksonville.
Charlie, as a poverty reporter, homelessness is part of your beat. Is there a sense that there is real momentum on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk, and I think we still need to see, substantial resources and sort of specific plans, committed to actually, making things happen on the ground for people who are homeless. On the veteran issue in specific, that's really just a sad nationwide problem that we find this happening. But, and homelessness is just so intertwined with other issues that you really have to, I think, it seems, if you're going to prevent homelessness, not just trim down on it, but also prevent people who are sort of on the edge right now, you have to look at it from a healthcare perspective. You have one huge hospital bill, that can ruin you. Think about drug addiction. Maybe that could lead to a big hospital bill if you overdose or just losing your job, right? So that's a mental health thing. And then, obviously just, wages, wage inequality, all sorts of labor issues that, think about, like maybe a single mother who's got to work X amount of jobs. How long can that be sustained, or is she going to find herself homeless at some point? So there's so many different angles that could lead someone to becoming homeless that, you can have policies to address it on the ground, but you also have to, I think of it as a multifaceted issue and attack a lot of other things to prevent it.
A lot of elements. I want to shift gears a little bit and turn.
And can I just clarify something really quickly?
Yeah, right on.
Before Leroy comes and gets me, it's Lee High School. That's where he went,
okay.
Right? Which we know.
And that's Riverside.
Riverside now.
Yes.
Okay.
He's a comedian, and he will call like, Keitha, what are you doing? So there we go.
Good Googling. All right. A couple of stories I want to talk about. A couple of cases that either had to be dropped or that cost taxpayers a bundle because of questions about those arrests. So the first case is a $200,000 settlement with the city of Jacksonville for the police shooting of Jamie Johnson. He's the FAMU student who was shot and killed during a traffic stop. Randy DeFore, what is the legal calculation that goes into whether to fight or settle this case?
It's interesting that it's settled, so that tells you a lot, right? I mean, in my mind, that tells me that there's some question as to whether the process, the stop, and then the killing, whether it was appropriate. Otherwise, you defend. I mean, that
we should say that an internal investigation cleared the officer of any wrongdoing from an investigative standpoint.
Even more reason why would you settle? Where's the legal liability if the officer was cleared totally? So maybe it's, I don't know. I question the facts as to the settlement, but I'm glad the family got money. I mean, That's terrible.
Another case that came into the news this week, it involves 2 DEA task force agents, former at this point. Both are facing federal charges of drug trafficking and taking money from drug sales and splitting it with confidential informants. And because of those pending charges, the state had to drop its case against a Jacksonville couple who's charged with shooting a police detective during a SWAT raid. That's a pretty big case to have to abandon, Anne.
Yeah, and that's a really high-profile one, but you wonder about how many other cases that these 2 DEA agents were involved in that could also be dropped coming down the line. I mean, I doubt this is the last one we'll see. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a tough pill for those prosecutors and JSO to have to swallow. But, you know, at the end of the day, they just said, because we depended on these agents and their testimony, we just don't have what it takes to get a conviction. And, you know, that costs taxpayers. It's a whole mess.
Just very briefly, Keitha, what message does it send when you have a case like this dropped because of alleged, police wrongdoing?
What message does it send? It's sad. I mean, it's going to have a lot of people who are already skeptical about police being trustworthy. It's going to have them thinking, you know what, I can't trust officers. Which is sad, because you can, we do have a lot of officers that we can trust and believe in, but there are those who are, as they call, dirty cops, which perhaps is the case this time around. So it sends a sad message, and it's disheartening when you think about it, because so many times we try to teach our children, you want to believe in our officers, especially in marginalized areas where you don't really trust police. A case like this is going to have people saying, well, you see why we don't? And it's sad, but we're just going to see how this plays out. We're going to have to see how it plays out.
Well, we're going to lighten things up right now because it is now time for our lightning round. So on Sunday, Shinta, Malayan tiger at the Jacksonville Zoo, gave birth to 3 cubs. That means love in Indonesia, pronounced Shinta. I think I'm getting that right. According to the Department of Wildlife and National Parks, there are fewer than 150 of these tigers left in the wild, and now there are 3 more on the planet. So that's good news. Keitha, what do you got to share?
I remember us sharing a side-by-side picture of the tiger when she was not pregnant and when she was pregnant. And I asked my producers, what are we doing? Because as a person who was pregnant with twins, I don't think it's really fair to do this side-by-side. She had 3 cubs in her, for goodness sakes. Let's leave her alone. Anyway, I'm happy. I'm glad she's had her babies. The babies are healthy. We saw a cam of them today, a little secret cam of them, and she was nursing them. And they're happy and healthy, so it's great.
Right on. Randy DeFore, what do you got?
For lightning round, I got Garden Club is hosting an event for young gardeners, grades 1 through 6, called Budding Gardeners. They're going to work on some strawberry growing, and they're going to taste them. And so if you've got kids in that age range, sign up. It'll have to be a lot of fun.
All right. Ann Maxwell, what's cooking?
So we've been working on this investigation about Amazon sales tax. So we're thinking there might be a good chunk of people in our viewing area who might be owed money by Amazon. That's the case of a couple local people we've talked to who said Amazon's overcharging them sales tax going back, as much as 10 years because they're getting their addresses mixed up. And so Amazon's now looking into it. And so they're kind of hopeful they might get hundreds of dollars back.
Just briefly.
Yeah, we've got some big projects working at the Tributary right now that I'm on, to the point where, I don't want to talk publicly about it because there's various issues.
Exciting.
But I'll just use the time to say, if any Jaguars players are listening, tell Christian Kirk he's been great in fantasy. I hope he enjoyed his week off. And,
right on. Well, thanks to Keitha Nelson, Ann Maxwell, Charlie McGee, and Randy DeFore for being here. We'll be right
Congaree and Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. Serious injury cases are complex, and civil trial attorneys present the evidence juries need to see and hear. More at waynehogan.law.
This week's election results gave both parties much to think about. Can President Biden drive the turnout Democrats need next year? Will abortion rights continue to drag on Republicans' chances of regaining power? Also, why didn't it work out for WeWork? And country music shows its love for a fast car from the 80s.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
And we're back. I'm sitting here with Matt Shaw of the Jacksonville Music Experience, who brings the beautiful noise of Northeast Florida and beyond. JME covers artists far and wide, in addition to previews and reviews. They also introduce us to artists that we just can't miss. And Matt's here with 3 upcoming concerts. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Ann. Good to be here.
Good. What are you looking forward to musically?
Well, I just want to, just a reminder, on jacksmusic.org, we've got our calendar page, and you can preview artists there. It's the most comprehensive one in the region, I would argue.
100% it is.
But before we talk about any of the shows coming up, we need to travel back to 2007-ish. We're 3 years away from Spotify's U.S. launch. Social media is in its infancy. The iPhone has just made its debut. And people at this time kind of surf the web mostly from desktop computers. And meanwhile, a group from Jacksonville records 4 songs, uploads them to MySpace, and within a year, they're playing Coachella late night with David Letterman, later with Jules Holland. I'm talking about the Black Kids, who enjoyed one.
That really personally. But I was happy for them.
We've got a big, long feature on Black Kids on jacksmusic.org right now. If you're wondering what happened to them, they had this meteoric rise and then a quick fall, and it's like I was really fascinated with the story because it reminds us of a time before social media, post sort of Prince dominance in breaking new bands and stuff, where the blogs were able to like skyrocket a band into the national conversation. And they had a really poor Pitchfork review for their debut full length, and that is sort of cited today as like the last time a Pitchfork review kind of buried a band. But they're doing great. They're playing in Mexico City at a big festival like a couple days after the Intuition show.
Awesome.
Next to Arcade Fire and The Cure and all these other big bands. So they're doing great.
And I'm looking forward to seeing them. I've actually invited a couple of them on, so hopefully we'll see.
It'll be great. Yeah.
Have a conversation on Monday ahead of their show, and that's on Wednesday. Is that right?
On Wednesday, yeah. And we'll move on to January here at WJCT on the soundstage. I want to talk about Sunny War, Nashville guitarist and singer-songwriter. Her 2023 album, Anarchist Gospel, is on a bunch of people's best of the year lists. Rolling Stone, Spin, Mojo, just to name a few. She's got this really interesting guitar style. She draws from punk and blues, and she's got a bunch of featured artists on this album. Allison Russell, Dave Rawlings, even Jim James from My Morning Jacket is on there. We're stoked to welcome Sunny War on January 12th. Here's the lead single from Anarchist Gospel. It's called No Reason. I should mention that show's on the soundstage here. If you haven't been to a show at our facility, it's a pretty magical space, and so we're so excited to have Sunny War and our own Stacey Bennett. Her band Focus People is opening that show, so it's going to be a good time here.
Stacey Bennett, this show's producer and a genius boss person of WJCT.
An incredible songwriter as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So last, we heard a little bit of indie rock. We just heard some kind of American roots music. So does country and shoegaze go together? Apparently it does. The last song I want to play comes from a band called Wednesday from Asheville, North Carolina. The group's new record, Rat Saw God, draws from both and has made them one of the most buzzed about bands in the country. They're at Jackrabbits, the enduring San Marco club, on February 3rd. They'll be celebrating 25 years in the live music business that month. That's Jackrabbits. But here's a big country tinge song from Wednesday called Chosen to Deserve.
We always started by telling all our best stories first. So now that it's been a while, I'll get so you know what you signed up for, what you're dealing with.
Well, that's our program. Matt Shaw, thank you so much for the peek at what's coming up ahead in
You're
music.
welcome.
If you missed anything, check out the rebroadcast at 8 p.m. or find today's show at WJCT.org and on your favorite podcast platform. Our executive producer is David Luckin. Our producer is Stacey Bennett. Kathy Waterman is our associate producer. Our director is Brady Coram. Don't forget to join us tomorrow afternoon at 4 for What's Health Got to Do with It. Dr. Joe Servin and his guests will discuss Alzheimer's and pancreatic cancer. Join us again Monday when we'll be talking about how AI is shaping ethics, education, and employment. I'm Ann Schindler, and you've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
I used to drink till I threw up on weeknights at my parents' house. My friends all took Benadryl till they could see crawling up the walls. One of those times my friend took a little too much. He had to get his stomach pumped. They took him over to the hospital and told us he was lucky to survive. I'm the girl that you've chosen to deserve.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at